To remove the top cover, first loosen the thumb screw at the rear of the cover that secures the cover to the PC. Grasp the handle on the cover and pull towards the back of the PC to release the cover. Pull the cover away from the PC. The top cover has several tabs on its side and leading edges, which fit into slots on the sides and front lip of the PC. To replace the cover, align the tabs on the cover into the corresponding slots on the PC, then slide the cover forward to lock it into position. Tighten the thumb screw at the rear of the cover to secure the cover to the PC. To remove the front bezel, first remove the top cover. Unlatch the 3 top tabs of the front bezel and rotate the bezel away from the PC. The front bezel has 3 hooked tabs on the bottom and the top, which fit into slots and over edges on the PC. To replace the front bezel, align the tabs on the bottom of the bezel into the slots on the PC, then press the top tabs firmly into place. To remove a PCI x1 or x16 expansion card if present in the unit, first remove the top cover. Make sure you have removed any external connectors from the expansion card, such as wireless antennas. Detach any connectors from the card to the motherboard. Pull up to disengage the expansion card retaining latch and swing it out. Pull up on the latch for the PCI x16 slot on the motherboard if removing a full-length graphics card. Carefully pull out the expansion card. To replace an expansion card, carefully align and push the card into its slot on the motherboard until it is fully seated. Swing and press the expansion card retaining latch into place. Attach any internal connectors necessary to other system components. To replace the system fan, first remove the top cover and the front bezel. Next, detach the fan connector to the motherboard. Remove the 2 Phillips number 2 screws that attach the fan to the front of the PC. Keep your hand on the fan as you remove the last screw and pull the fan out of the PC. There are 2 holes on the fan that align over locator pegs on the inside of the PC. To replace the system fan, align the fan so it is blowing outward. The label on the fan should be facing inside the system, and the connector out the left side edge of the fan. Align the holes of the fan over their pegs, and align the screw holes of the fan with the screw holes at the front of the PC. Secure the fan to the front of the PC with its 2 Phillips number 2 screws. Reattach the fan connector to the motherboard. To remove the fan duct, first remove the top cover. Pull out on the two retaining tabs for the fan duct and pull the fan duct out of the PC. There are two small ledges on the inside of the fan duct that rest under the top edge of the CPU cooler. To replace the fan duct, carefully place the fan duct back in the unit, being careful of the optical drive power connector. Pull out on the retaining tabs for the fan duct, and press the fan duct down until the tabs snap into place over the edge of the CPU cooler. To remove the optical drive, first remove the top cover and the fan duct. Detach the power and data cables from the back of the drive. Note that the data connector has a latch that must be squeezed to release the connector. Press on the green drive release latch at the rear of the drive and slide the drive out of the front of the unit. Pull the green drive release latch off of the optical drive. To replace the optical drive, first attach the green drive release latch to the drive. There are two small pins on the latch that fit into two small holes on the side of the optical drive. Press the pins into their holes to secure the latch. Slide the drive into its bay through the front of the PC with the green drive latch on the right side of the drive until the latch snaps into place inside the unit. Replace the power and data connectors to the optical drive. To remove the hard drive, first remove the top cover, the fan duct, the optical drive, and the front bezel. Disconnect the power and data connectors from the drive. Note, each connector has a latch that must be squeezed to remove the connector. Free the optical drive and hard drive power cables from the cable guide on the side of the cage. Detach the single Torx 15 screw for the drive cage from the inside of the unit. Pull the drive's cage out of the unit. To remove a 2.5-inch SSD drive from the cage, detach the 4 Torx 15 screws from the underside of the cage and reserve. Lift the cage off of the drive. To remove a 3.5-inch drive from the cage, remove the 4 Torx 15 screws from the sides of the drive cage and reserve. Remove the drive from the drive cage. To install a 3.5-inch drive in the hard drive cage, place the drive in the drive cage spindle side up, aligning the screw holes on the sides of the drive with the holes on the sides of the cage. Secure the hard drive to the cage with 4 Torx 15 screws on the sides of the cage. To install a 2.5-inch drive in the hard drive cage, place the cage over the drive upside down and secure the drive to the cage with its 4 Torx 15 screws on the bottom of the cage. The drive cage has tabs on the side and front edges that fit into slots on the PC. To replace the hard drive cage, align the tabs of the cage into their slots on the unit. secure the cage in the unit with its Torx 15 screw. Replace the hard drive and optical drive power connectors into the cable guide on the side of the cage. Replace the power and data connectors to the hard drive. To replace system memory, first remove the top cover, the fan duct, the optical drive, the front bezel, and the hard drive cage. Simultaneously push down on the clips on either side of the DDR4 DIMM socket to release the memory module. Carefully pull out the memory module. There is one notch on the bottom of every DDR4 DIMM module, offset from the center, that fits over a tab in the DDR4 DIMM memory socket. When installing DDR4 DIMMs, align the notch on the module with the tab in the socket. Press the module into the socket until the clips on both sides of the socket lock into place. To remove the power supply, first remove the top cover, the fan duct, the optical drive, the front bezel, and the hard drive cage. Then detach the power supply connector to the motherboard. Note that the connector has a latch that must be squeezed to detach the connector. Next, detach the 4 Torx 15 screws that connect the power supply to the rear of the PC. Press the latch at the inside edge of the power supply in the unit and slide the power supply into the PC before fully removing it from the unit. Always replace the entire power supply. Never attempt to work within the power supply unit. There is a slot on the bottom side of the power supply that slides over a tab on the bottom wall of the PC. To replace the power supply, align the power supply slot slightly behind the tab, then slide the power supply toward the rear of the unit until the latch snaps into place. Reattach the 4 Torx 15 screws at the rear of the chassis to secure the power supply to the unit. Replace the power supply connector to the motherboard. CMOS factory settings should be restored as a first step before replacing the system motherboard. To restore CMOS factory settings, first remove the top cover, the fan duct, the optical drive, the front bezel, and the hard drive cage. Remove the battery from the motherboard. Wait 30 seconds. Replace the battery to the motherboard. CMOS factory settings are now reset. Note that you will now need to enter System BIOS and reset the clock in BIOS after this procedure. To remove the CPU cooler, first remove the top cover and the fan duct. Detach the CPU cooler connector to the motherboard. Loosen the 4 captured Torx 15 screws for the CPU cooler. And gently pull the CPU cooler out of the PC. Before replacing the CPU cooler into the system, first clean off the old thermal grease from the microprocessor. Clean off the thermal grease from the CPU cooler if replacing the same CPU cooler back into the system. Apply new thermal grease or thermal pad to the microprocessor. Align the 4 screws of the CPU cooler over the 4 screw holes on the motherboard. Tighten the 4 Torx 15 screws to secure the CPU cooler to the motherboard. Replace the CPU cooler connector to the motherboard. To remove the CPU, first remove the top cover, the fan duct, and the CPU cooler. Press down to release the CPU load lever from its retention tab, and pull the load lever and load plate away from the socket. Identify pin 1 on the socket by the mark on the corner of the socket stencil. Line up the pin 1 corner of the Intel CPU removal replacement tool over the socket. Press down on the plunger of the removal tool to pick up the CPU from the socket, and remove the tool and the CPU from the motherboard. To replace the CPU, first identify pin 1 position on the microprocessor by noting the yellow mark on the corner of the chip assembly. Make sure the Intel CPU staging tool side pins are set to the correct socket type for the CPU. For this unit, it is LGA1151. Place the CPU into the Intel CPU staging tool. When correctly inserted, the small notches on the side of the CPU should align over the side pins on the staging tool. Place the removal replacement tool over the stage, lining up the pin 1 triangles on each tool. Press down on the removal replacement tool to pick the CPU up from the stage. Align the removal replacement tool again to pin 1 on the motherboard CPU socket. Press the plunger on the removal replacement tool to release the CPU into the socket. Swing the load plate down. Lock the load lever under its retaining tab to secure the microprocessor in place. To remove the motherboard, first remove the top cover, the fan duct, the optical drive, the front bezel, and the hard drive cage. Remove system memory, and any expansion cards from the expansion card slots. Remove the CPU cooler and the CPU. When removing the Intel CPU, install a socket cover on the load plate window before replacing the load plate over the socket. Detach all connectors to the motherboard. Remove the 7 Torx 15 screws that attach the motherboard to the PC. slide the motherboard toward the front of the unit, tip the rear edge up, and carefully remove the motherboard from the unit. Place the motherboard in an anti-static bag. To replace the motherboard, carefully tip the front connector edge of the motherboard into the unit, clearing connectors away from underneath the sides of the board as you tip the rear edge down, and align the back panel connectors with their cutouts on the rear of the chassis. Replace the 7 Torx 15 screws to secure the motherboard to the unit. Replace all connectors to the motherboard.